Now, I don't know whether this is going to be a video in itself. Knowing me, I'll probably ramble on enough to make it a video in itself, or I don't know whether it's going to be a little segment in another video. But this is a very important topic that I really want to bring to light on my channel that has affected me personally in the past, and something that is just generally very important for us females. So let's talk about smear tests. So for those of you that don't know, I am 25 in August, and 25 is that age where we start to think about smear tests, where it starts to come up in conversation, and you know, sort of 24, 25, you're going to be awaiting that letter in the posts that reminds you to book your smear test. And I knew mine was coming soon, but I didn't expect it all to happen so quickly. Literally all of this has happened in the space of a month, and I didn't really get much chance to think about it, which actually in retrospect is a very good thing, because I'm one of those people, if I think about it too much, I start to worry and get really anxious, and the fact that I didn't really have the chance to think about it meant I didn't really worry about it too much. And I think it's a very good topic in the sense of it's important to talk about, but also it's a very well spoken about topic too. This is something that appears on my social media quite a lot anyway, and has done in the past. So I've been, I think, well prepared for it, but not all of you may have the same experiences. So if you haven't really seen much about smear tests, you're approaching my age and you're worried about it, maybe this is a video that can kind of ease your thoughts and worries. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a description about my personal experience, what happened, what I was told, and also open my results with you, because I haven't done that yet. Let's have a little chat about the process of booking your smear test, what it's all about, why we do it, because it's a very important thing to book. So as I mentioned just now, I do have a little bit of experience behind why we get smear tests, and that is the big C word, cervical cancer. So someone very close to me actually had cervical cancer, and it was a very tough thing to go through because they were so close to me. I was quite young. I think I was about 10, 11 when I went through all of this. So it's a good 15 years ago now almost. So it's quite some time, but it's still not something that ever leaves your mind, the fact that you've seen it firsthand, therefore you wouldn't ever want to go through it. So it was definitely more of an incentive for me to book the smear test as soon as the letter came through. I know it's not genetic, it's not something that is genetic if you are wondering, but it's still scary when you see it. You don't ever want to go through that personally ever again. Cancer in general is a very horrible thing, something that I know that we all try to put to the back of our minds and not think about, because if we don't think about it, we don't worry about it, and it's not there, but it is, and that is the reason why we have smear tests. So I will give you a little description as per the NHS website, so I give you the pure hard facts about what it is smear tests do, why we have them. So it's important to educate ourselves, and if you don't know already, this would be good for you. So word for word, in black and white on the NHS website, a cervical screening checks the health of your cervix. It's not a test for cancer, it's a test to help prevent cancer. All women and people with cervix aged 25 to 64 should be invited by letter to book your smear test. During the screening appointment, a small sample of cells will be taken from your cervix to be tested. The sample is checked for certain types of HPV that can cause changes to the cells of your cervix. The type of HPV that they are looking for when they are taking the sample is high-risk types of HPV. If these types of HPV are found, the sample is then checked for any changes in the cells of your cervix. These can then be treated before they get the chance to turn into cervical cancer. I'm sure we are all aware at the moment that the NHS is extremely pressured at the moment, at this very present time, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't book your cervical cancer screening or use it as an excuse to put it off, because they are very proactive with booking it as long as you have the letter. I did have a close friend to me who is actually 25 before I am, and she didn't have her letter. So what she did is she actually rang her local GP and they booked her in. Just because you don't have the letter doesn't mean you can't book in, but it's something you should chase up if you haven't had the letter and you are 25 within the next 6 months or so. Along with that letter, you will also get a little leaflet that basically goes over everything about the screening, what it's about, pretty much everything that I said just now, but in a little bit more detail. So hopefully that answers your questions when you do get that leaflet, but of course that doesn't stop you asking any more when you go to see the nurse that does your screening. Social media is a great tool with this kind of thing, because a lot of people lately I have seen actually take you along with them to their cervical cancer screening, which is really insightful. That's actually what I did. I'm very much one of those people that likes to see what I'm about to go through. So watching people go through the procedure was actually really relieving. You can see how quick it is, how painless it is, and just generally get someone else's perspective on it, because it's so nerve-wracking going into something that you don't know what you're about to experience. So that's a general, very brief overview on what a smear test is and why we do it. And let's have a little chat now about my own personal experience. So I actually received my letter to book my appointment for my smear test approximately a month ago. It actually got sent to my mum's house because it came before I even had the opportunity to change my address at my GP. But it was scary to receive it. Of course it is. Like, it was one of those where I knew it was coming. I knew it was because my friends around me were getting it. Not everyone had, but I'd had friends that had already had their smear tests done, and they said that they got their letter around the 6-month mark before they're 25. I'm 25 in August, and I got my letter just in the cusp of March, I think it was in the end. So it was about 5 months before I was 25, but the NHS is so busy that I knew it was gonna come eventually. The first thing I'd done as soon as I got the letter was booked it, because I knew if I put it to one side, I would put it off and put it off and put it off. So that's one tip from me, is just book it as soon as you get the letter. One very important factor to consider when booking your smear test is your period. I have to say, I actually didn't even think about this when I booked it, and the doctors didn't even mention anything to me when I did book it. They didn't actually ask me the question, which now thinking about it, they probably should have, but it totally went over my head, and that is, you cannot be on your period when you have your smear test. So make sure when you book it that it aligns with your period somewhat. If you're on the pill or you're on other forms of contraception, that actually helps you a little bit better, I guess. But if you're one of those that is not on anything and you just monitor your periods on an app or just like with a monthly calendar, just make sure it aligns with the date that you're not going to be on your period. So once I booked it, it was very much the case of, right, okay, this is happening now. The nerves kind of set in a little bit because of the unknown. So basically what I did straight away is ring my mum, someone I know that has had a fair few smear tests in her life, and she was like, yeah, this is what to expect, here's some tips from me. And that's definitely something I would suggest to do, is speak to the people around you that have had smear tests, because again, speaking to people that have been through it is so relieving. I actually booked my test about 2.5 weeks after I got the letter. So I had some time to kind of sort of let it sink in a little bit, but also time to kind of forget that it's gonna happen, just so then I didn't have to worry about it too much. That's how I personally deal with it. So one thing that I would suggest to do for the night before, just to make yourself feel a little bit better, is get an outfit ready that is very easy for when you get to the doctors. And what I mean by that is, one tip that I picked up from videos that I had watched in the past, one video I absolutely will recommend is from Zoe Sugg. She actually took her viewers to her smear test and sort of spoke through it with the nurse and talked to us one thing about what she was wearing. And I was like, I would never have thought of that. I probably would have just shown up in the most inconvenient outfit possible and just not even batted an eyelid about what I was wearing. So one thing I made sure to do was wear a skirt. So I prepared an outfit where I could easily just flip my skirt up and not have to worry about taking trousers off. Being bare from the waist down is very intrusive, and at least just having a skirt on, kind of propping that up a little bit, was Definitely less invasive, I personally felt. Of course, it's still an invasive procedure, but it definitely felt less invasive because I still had my full outfit on. The only thing that I didn't have on was my pants. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, I don't think I'm actually worried about the procedure itself. I'm more so worried about showing my private parts down there, because you only ever really show your partner or yourself your private parts down there. And I'm personally a very private person in the sense of I am quite conservative when I dress. I don't really like showing myself too much. Like if I can wear a turtleneck over a jumper that's like a V-neck, I absolutely will. Don't know why I'm like that. I'm trying to get myself out of that, but I've just always been that way. And the thought of this procedure, on top of obviously what they're going to do inside as well, was just so much, like, for me. And just that little tip of wearing a skirt over trousers or something that's just so easy to just prop up and then throw back down when you're finished was just so relieving for me. One final thing I do want to add on the end of it, which I know all of us, including myself, do think about before going to a smear test and preparing for a smear test, is what's going on down there. I will reassure you that the nurses do not care. They see so many different types of vaginas, so many different cuts, so many different shaves, so many different types of vaginas. Of course, it's nice to tidy up down there and make yourself look nice for the person that's going to be doing your screening, but like I say, they don't care. It's probably wasted effort at the end of the day, so just come as you are. So I chose to arrive at the doctor's about 10 minutes before my appointment. I'm one of those, I like to get there, I like to get settled, and that helps me ease the nerves a little bit. So if that works for you, follow my footsteps. If you like to just get there at the time you have to be there, so you don't have to be there for as long as you need to be, then do that as well, whatever works for you. So when I walked into the room, I actually had a female nurse. I have to say, it was really reassuring walking into the room and seeing a female nurse. I know not everyone is that bothered by being seen by a female nurse or doctor, but I personally do like to speak to a female nurse or doctor because I feel like they understand me a bit better. I always get a little bit worried about asking the receptionist whenever I make an appointment, can I see a female nurse or doctor? Because I'm like, well, obviously they've only got the resources that they have and the people they have to see me. But it's just something that makes me feel a lot more reassured. And if you don't ask, you don't get. This time I didn't even think about asking, but yeah, I'm just grateful that I was able to have a female nurse that was able to understand my concerns through and through. So when I came into the room and sat down, the first thing she asked me was, is this your first vaginal examination? For me personally, it was, but that might not be the case for everyone that comes into the room that's my age. So I guess she knew how to adjust her approach and make sure I was relieved before going into the examination, because if I'm going into the examination stressed, that obviously affects how easy the procedure is going to be. Don't really want to go into that too much, but I guess you can understand what I'm trying to say. So yeah, she sat down with me for a couple of minutes, asked me if I had any concerns, and I basically addressed to her that someone very close to me has had cervical cancer in the past. I've experienced what it's like to go through that and experienced what the aftermath of surgery is like and how it just affects you as a person. As soon as she knew that, she was very much like, okay, this is what you're going to be experiencing. This is why we do it. She was straight away into the whys, why we're doing it, what we're looking for, which is something that I like to get from people when I'm a little bit sort of worried, is the whys. I'm very much like the who, what, why. I ask all the questions if I can. And straight away, the fact that I didn't even have to ask any questions really about the procedure was so reassuring. I guess it's quite hard for the nurses because they probably do smear test after smear test after smear test, and it can be quite robotic for them. And maybe at times it was a little bit, in the sense of she was just maybe reading in her head off a script, but it's what they do, it's their job. So once all of my questions and concerns had been answered and the nurse made sure of that, she then said, right, There's a curtain behind you, as you can see. Step behind that curtain, you'll see a bed. Make sure you are naked from the waist down, and then jump on the bed and pop this towel over you. So the towel was a very thin towel, but it basically made sure that she only had to see what she had to see when she had to see it. So your decency is respected, but obviously the procedure is very invasive and they know that. So they want to protect your privacy and decency as much as they possibly can, which was really nice. So once I was comfortable and ready to start, I then called the nurse to come through the curtain, and she basically spoke through with me all of the different tools that she'd be using. So the speculum and also the device that she would use to collect the sample. So it's basically this long brush that basically to me looked like a toilet brush, but a mini version. But it basically, yeah, simply collects the samples, and she was very good in talking me through exactly what she was going to do with each tool and also how long it was going to take as well. She then says she was first of all going to use the speculum to check the health of my cervix, make sure everything was okay, and then once she'd done that, then she would collect the sample from the cervix. I will give you a little trigger warning right now and say that in the next minute or so of me talking about this procedure that I'm going to do my best to make this as less as possible, but it's kind of hard not to. I'll do my best, but I want to be as open and as real as possible with you guys about what this is all about. So first thing she said was relax your legs, because obviously you're very tense, you don't really want this to happen. Your body just naturally tenses up. So I tried my best to just relax with my legs apart, just pretending like this isn't happening, but it's hard not to. So try and relax yourself as much as possible during the procedure, because that makes it as quick and as painless as possible. So once I'd somewhat done that, the speculum went in. It was not pleasant. And people are right in saying that the speculum going in is the worst part of the whole thing, because you don't want it to happen. Your body's rejecting that thing going in. So it's quite a force that they have to get the speculum inside of you. It's uncomfortable, not painful. I will emphasize that. It's not painful at all. It's just uncomfortable. And it doesn't last any more than 30 seconds, the whole procedure. So just keep that in mind. It's uncomfortable, painless, it's fine. It's got to be done. One thing I forgot to say about the speculum is that once it's in, they do crank it a little bit so it widens the view to your cervix. That's probably the same level of uncomfort as the speculum going in. It's just a different sensation, but it's still okay to deal with. One thing I have been educated by through other people's videos and other people's content online is they can use different size speculums to work for you. So if you are struggling with the one that they do try with you first, they do have other ones to make it a little bit more comfortable for you, but still gives them the same result when completing the procedure. The one thing that it made me do when the speculum was going in was like that, sort of like clenching myself, because I think I was just stressed more so about the not knowing what I'm about to go through, but it was also like the preparation to like experience pain if I was going to. But once it was in, I was like, oh, that isn't actually too bad. So she had a quick inspection of the cervix, probably no more than 10 seconds, just to have a little look. She has a little light that sort of shines in so she can get a better look. But yeah, that was no more than a quick sort of 10-second look over just to make sure everything's looking good and healthy. And then she took the swab and then went inside and sort of collected the cells that she needed to collect. Have to say, didn't even realise she did that. Didn't feel it at all, which was really nice, I guess. Knowing that the worst thing that I could have gone through had already been done. So yeah, be relieved that that doesn't hurt. And if it does, you can say to the nurse that you're dealing with that it is painful, and then she will adjust accordingly to make it as comfortable for you as possible. I know a lot of us are very guilty in the sense of we just try and sort of shut up, put up with it and deal with it, but don't feel like you have to do that if it is really, really bad. So she then took the swab sample out when she'd given it a bit of a twist and a turn, and then took the speculum out, and that was it. That was the procedure done. She then took the speculum and put it in a little test tube type thing to then be sent up to my local hospital to be tested. The one thing I did notice on the swab is quite a bit of blood. And I said to her, is that normal? And she said, yes, it can be normal. Not everyone does bleed, but it can happen, and it did for me. And it was quite a bit of blood, and what it did look like quite a bit of blood on the sample. And I have to say, I was about a week or so away from my period, and sometimes my body can get a little bit sensitive about a week before, and I think that was a very sensitive procedure that my body wasn't expecting. So I think it was just its natural response to just bleed. And that's also another thing that I really didn't come prepared for once my procedure had been finished, is period products. I did not bring a tampon, did not bring a pad, because I did not think I'd need it. Note to self, note to you guys as well, bring your period products with you, because you could potentially spot after your procedure, which I did not even think about. And I don't know why I didn't think about it. I'm pretty sure I have seen it on other videos before when I've educated myself that way in the past, so I'm not sure why that kind of went over my head. But yeah, just make sure you bring some of your favourite period products with you, just in case you bleed. And that was pretty much it. That was it done. No more than 30 seconds, I think, the whole procedure, if that. It was very, very quick. Like I say, these nurses do it in and out all day long. They are so quick at it, so they know what they're doing, and it's so reassuring to know that it's such a quick procedure, quicker than I even thought it was going to be. Once the procedure was all done and dusted, she then pops behind the curtain and said I could get dressed and sort myself out a little bit, and then come back around and she'll discuss what's going to happen next. So I put my pants back on, put my skirt down, so easy. And then I was ready to have the further discussion with the nurse about what to expect. So she said I will be receiving my results within the next 2 weeks. It'd be 2 to 6 weeks, she said. And I thought maybe it might be a little bit longer because of the Easter holidays. I knew a lot of people might not be in the labs in the hospital during that time, and it might sort of delay it if there's less staff. But actually, I've received it dead on 2 weeks, so that's brilliant. They say if you don't receive anything within 6 weeks, to get back in touch with the nurse and the doctors at your local GP, and they'll chase it up. But she said if there is anything to worry about, you will normally receive your hospital letter to have a further test before you even receive the results, so you kind of know what's happened. It's obviously hard for them to say exactly when you're going to receive it, but I'm very lucky that I've received it exactly dead on when I was expecting to. One thing I did experience after I left the doctors, when I got in my car, when my legs were absolutely shaking like mad. So I had to sort of pause before I even started driving. So while I was waiting for my legs to kind of calm down, I rang my mum and I was like, this is my experience, this is what has just happened, this is how I feel about everything. And because my mum actually works within the NHS, she's one person that I can go to kind of ask any questions that I wasn't really so comfortable asking the nurse. That's one thing I'm very grateful that I have with my mum, is for this kind of thing. If I have any concerns about my health, I can go to her and she reassures me in a way that it helps me out. So this is the one thing I did as soon as I got in the car, was rang my mum, and I knew I would have done even if my legs weren't shaking. But she was basically like, yeah, you obviously had a lot of adrenaline in you that's coming out now, and you just need to let that calm down, because you were obviously so nervous without even realising it, and now it's just all coming out. So she said just hold off for a bit, sit in your car for a bit. Luckily there's a shop over the road, so I could walk over there and get myself a drink just to kind of up my sugar levels a little bit. But yeah, overall it was just a really weird experience coming out of there. I felt so much relief. I also didn't realise obviously how nervous I truly was. So that was my overall procedure. It was very quick, so simple, and I was literally in the doctors for no more than about 10 minutes. So hopefully you guys experienced the same sort of experience that I did, because I feel like mine was a very positive one. And I don't think I ever really hear about negative experiences. So if you do have any negative experiences that you want to share about your personal smear test in the comments, to kind of all educate each other that watches this video, maybe that might be good. Anyway, enough chat about the smear test itself. It's now time for the dreaded letter. I thought this is quite a good thing to do on camera, and something that I haven't necessarily seen from other people who have made content on their smear test. They just kind of show the procedure, which is absolutely fantastic. I did think about asking my nurse if I could record the procedure, but I thought, well, it's invasive enough. I probably want to deal with it privately and then talk about my experience later on, which I'm actually really glad I've done. But if you want to go and see people actually experience the procedure, like I said, Zoe Sugg is a great one to watch. Okay, let's read the letter. Dear Chloe, thank you for coming for your cervical screening. Your result is HPV negative. This means your risk of cervical cancer is very low and there is no need to check for abdominal cells, even if you've had these in the past. Your next screening test is due on or around this date, which is actually in 3 years' time. We will send you a reminder letter nearer the time. So that means I am negative for HPV. I have no signs of any high risk cells, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't change. So that's why they get you in for a test about 3 years down the line, and they will call you in for that as and when that is needed. If, for instance, I did have the results saying that I have signs of these cells, but they're not high risk, they would get me in for a test in a year's time. There is a little bit of extra writing further down the letter, so I'll read that to you as well. So no screening is 100% effective. In very rare cases, cervical screenings may fail to pick up HPV infections that need further investigation. This is called a false negative result. Screening also cannot prevent every cervical cancer. So this doesn't eliminate my chance of ever getting it. It's just seeing what's going on in the present time. Cancer can develop in between screening tests if you have any symptoms such as bleeding between periods, after sex, or after menopause or unusual vaginal discharge. Please speak to your GP as soon as possible. So that's something that I guess you guys can kind of make a mental note of. These are some of the symptoms of cervical cancer. And if you are worried if it's something that's happening to you regularly, like bleeding between periods, bleeding after sex, always get something like that looked at if you're concerned. Just waiting for your smear test sometimes just isn't enough. So that's that. I am negative for HPV at the moment, which is a great result. I kind of knew that was going to be the case because I hadn't had any notes or anything from the local hospital. But that is my overall experience of my smear test. Just because you see someone have a really positive experience doesn't mean yours is going to be exactly the same. Don't compare your experiences to others, just get advice from other people and a bit of reassurance knowing what you're about to experience. That's such an important thing. Social media, I've really learnt lately, is something, a place that can be negative if you make it that way. And comparing your life, your experiences to others is such a damaging thing sometimes, even when it comes down to something like this, like cervical cancer screenings. Don't compare your situation to someone's that you see online who's had a really positive one. So I really hope this video gives you the advice and support that you need to encourage you to book your test if you are putting it off, because overall, the reason why we do it is so important. Even though the smear test doesn't prevent you getting cancer, it could potentially save your life by catching potential cancer cells early on. For those of you that are my age, we actually were, I think, one of the first generations to have the HPV vaccinations for this. Don't think just because you've had that, you're sorted. You're not. Those 3 vaccinations were a prevention of this. It's not something that's going to completely eliminate you being a victim to cervical cancer. I really hope this video helped you out in some way or another, gave you the advice you needed. Don't compare my experience to yours, just use it as a way to prepare for yours. As I said earlier, it saved one family member very close to me from cervical cancer. So I hope this really encourages you to go and book your smear test.